I never thought a Christmas dinner could change my life so drastically, but here I am, Anita, 28 years old, still trying to process what happened that evening. The whole thing started normally enough. I arrived at my parents' house, carrying a bottle of wine and homemade apple pie, just like I always did for family gatherings. The house was already full of relatives when I got there. The biggest surprise was that my younger sister Linda actually showed up. She usually skips these family things, always complaining that there are a lot of old people who talk about their illnesses. When we finally sat down to eat, everything seemed perfectly normal. Dad carved the turkey, Mom passed around her famous cranberry sauce, and Uncle Bob was already on his second glass of wine. The dining room was warm and cozy, with Christmas lights twinkling in the windows and the smell of cinnamon and pine needles in the air. Then Mom cleared her throat and turned to Linda with this weird smile I'd never seen before. "Linda, sweetie, why don't you tell everyone about that business you want to open?" I was in the middle of taking a bite of turkey when Linda started talking, her voice full of excitement I'd never heard from her before. "Oh my God, yes. So, I've got this amazing plan. I'm going to buy clothes from China, super cheap, really good quality stuff, and sell them here for a nice profit." I nearly dropped my fork. Linda? Starting a business? My sister, who hadn't worked a single day since graduating college 2 years ago. Who spent most of her time finding herself and posting selfies on Instagram? But before I could even process this information, the whole family erupted in cheers and congratulations. Uncle Bob raised his glass to our future successful businesswoman. Aunt Martha was going on about how she always knew Linda had it in her, and my cousins were already asking for family discounts. Then I saw Mom and Dad exchange that look, that particular parent look that means they're up to something. I'd seen it many times growing up, usually right before they announced something that would somehow benefit Linda at my expense. "Anita," Mom said, her voice sickeningly sweet, "you'll help your sister start her business, won't you? You have those savings for your apartment." I literally choked on my mashed potatoes. "What? Why can't she get a business loan?" I spluttered, reaching for my water glass. "There are banks that specifically help new entrepreneurs. She just needs to show them her business plan." Suddenly, the whole family started talking at once. Uncle Bob was saying something about family duty, Aunt Martha was reminiscing about how her sister had once helped her, with a much smaller amount, I'm sure, and my cousins were nodding along like bobbleheads. "Think about it, honey," Mom chimed in, her voice rising above the others. "When Linda's business takes off, she'll pay you back with interest. You'll be able to buy the most luxurious apartment in the city." They kept at it for 15 solid minutes. Every time I tried to argue, someone else would jump in with another guilt trip or emotional manipulation. Finally, exhausted and overwhelmed, I gave in. "Fine," I said quietly, staring down at my now cold dinner. "I'll help Linda with the money." The cheers that erupted around the table made me feel sick to my stomach. As I watched Linda accepting congratulations with that smug smile of hers, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just made a terrible mistake. A week after that fateful Christmas dinner, I was sitting at my desk at work when my phone buzzed. It was a message from Linda. "Hey sis. Hope you haven't forgotten about your promise to help with my business. I've done all the calculations, and I need $30,000 to get started. When can you transfer it?" I stared at my phone screen for a good 5 minutes, my coffee growing cold beside me. $30,000? I had to be reading this wrong. $30,000? That's a huge amount, Linda. Why do you need so much? I typed back, my hands shaking slightly. The response came almost immediately. "I know what I'm doing, Anita. I've calculated everything super carefully. $10,000 for initial inventory, $5,000 for store deposit and first month's rent, $5,000 for renovations, $5,000 for marketing, and $5,000 for employee salaries for the first month. Plus some extra for unexpected expenses. Don't worry, I promise I'll pay you back everything within 6 months. You know me, I always keep my promises." With a heavy heart, I opened my banking app. I hit transfer, watching the numbers change on my screen. Just like that, 5 years of careful saving, of declining dinner invitations and shopping trips, of taking extra projects at work, gone in seconds. Done, I messaged Linda. The money's in your account. Oh my God, thank you, thank you, thank you. You're the best sister ever. I'll make you proud, I promise. I put my phone face down on my desk and leaned back in my chair, memories flooding back unbidden. Like the time in high school when I needed new track shoes for the team, but Mom and Dad said they couldn't afford them, only to buy Linda a brand new iPhone the very next week because she was feeling down. Or when I wanted to take piano lessons, but they said it was too expensive, yet somehow found the money for Linda's horseback riding classes 6 months later. It wasn't just our parents either. Uncle Bob always slipped Linda extra money at family gatherings, saying she reminded him of himself when he was young. Aunt Martha would send her birthday checks twice as large as mine, because Linda was still finding her way in life. Even our cousins seemed to gravitate toward her naturally, drawn in by her outgoing personality and endless stream of dramatic stories. No matter what Linda did, lie about breaking Mom's favorite vase, borrow money from Dad's wallet, skip school to go to parties, there was always someone ready to make excuses for her. She's just spirited, they'd say. Or, she's still young, she'll grow out of it. Or my personal favorite, at least she's honest about what she wants. For example, Jenny Martinez had been my best friend. She had this beautiful leather jacket her grandmother had given her for her birthday. Linda had been jealous because Jenny's jacket was cooler than hers. I still remember exactly how everything went down. One day during lunch break, I saw Linda sneaking around near Jenny's locker. I didn't think much of it at the time, I should have. The next morning, Jenny came to school crying. Her jacket was ruined, covered in permanent marker and what looked like nail polish. I knew immediately who had done it. I'd seen the same nail polish color on Linda's dresser the night before. But before Jenny could even report what happened, Linda burst into tears in the middle of the hallway, wailing about how Jenny was going to blame her for ruining the jacket, and how Jenny had been mean to her all year. It was all lies, but Linda had always been good at crying on command. Aunt Martha got involved first. She marched into the school, demanding to speak with the principal. My niece would never do such a thing, she insisted. This other girl is clearly trying to frame her. Then Uncle Bob joined in, then our cousins, and finally our parents. They all rallied around Linda like she was some kind of victim. I sat through countless family discussions where they talked about how that Martinez girl was obviously jealous of Linda, how she was probably upset that I was spending time with my sister instead of her. I tried to speak up once, to tell them I'd seen Linda near Jenny's locker, but Mom shut me down immediately. Anita, how could you even think your sister would do something like that? Family stands together. The whole thing spiraled out of control. Our relatives kept showing up at school, complaining to teachers, confronting Jenny's parents. They made such a fuss that eventually, Jenny's mom transferred her to another school. I lost my best friend, and Linda got away with it completely. She even had the nerve to smile at me when we heard Jenny was leaving. See, she'd whispered to me in the hallway. That's what happens to people who aren't nice to me. I never told anyone what Linda said to me that day. What was the point? Nobody would have believed me anyway. Linda was the baby of the family, the one who could do no wrong, the one everyone rushed to protect. Now, over 15 years later, I found myself hoping things would be different. Maybe Linda had grown up. Maybe this business venture would be the thing that finally made her take responsibility for her actions. Maybe she'd prove everyone right about her potential. The next few weeks flew by in a blur of deadlines and meetings. I was leading a major software implementation project at work, which kept me too busy to think much about Linda's business venture. One Sunday, I stopped by my parents' house for our usual family dinner. Dad was watching baseball, and Mom was pulling a lasagna out of the oven, but Linda was nowhere to be seen. "Where's Linda?" I asked, helping Mom set the table. "Is she running late again?" Mom waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, she's away on a trip." I nearly dropped the plate I was holding. A trip? What do you mean, a trip? She's supposed to be starting a business. Don't take that tone with me, Anita, Mom snapped, her eyes narrowing. Obviously, it's a business trip. And frankly, you need to stop poking your nose into your sister's affairs. She knows what she's doing. I bit my tongue and finished setting the table in silence, but something didn't feel right. That night, lying in bed in my apartment, I opened Instagram and started scrolling through Linda's profile. My stomach dropped. There she was, posing in front of the Eiffel Tower. Sipping cappuccino at a cafe in Rome. Shopping in Milan. Living it up at a beach club in Greece. Each photo was more extravagant than the last, all posted within the past week. What the hell? I muttered to myself. If she's starting a clothing business with Chinese suppliers, why is she gallivanting around Europe? I barely slept that night, and as soon as I saw Linda had posted she was back home, I called her. Hey sis. Her voice was chirpy, like nothing was wrong. How are you? How was your trip? I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. She laughed that carefree laugh of hers. Oh my God, it was amazing. Don't worry, I totally thought everything through. I actually met with this incredible clothing supplier in Europe. They're going to be perfect for the business. European suppliers? I couldn't keep the skepticism out of my voice anymore. I thought you were importing from China. That was your whole business plan. Plans change, Anita. You need to be flexible in business. Trust me, I know what I'm doing. Right, I took a deep breath. So, when can I see the store? You know, the one you said you'd already found? There was a pause, just a fraction of a second too long. Oh, give me a week to get everything set up. I'll show you then, I promise. Something in her voice made my skin crawl, but I forced myself to stay calm. Fine, 1 week. I want to see this store of yours. Of course, no problem at all. I'll text you the address. The address Linda sent me was in a small shopping center on the outskirts of town. When I pulled into the parking lot, I spotted my parents' car already there. Of course they were here. Linda never did anything without her cheerleading squad. The space was small, but admittedly well arranged. Racks of clothing lined the walls, a few mannequins wore trendy outfits, and there was even a cozy sitting area with a coffee machine in the corner. Everything looked perfect. Too perfect. Isn't it amazing? Linda twirled around the store. Look at these pieces I got from my supplier. She gestured to a rack of dresses. And over here will be the accessories section. Oh, and I'm thinking of putting a makeup counter right here. Mom wiped away what looked suspiciously like tears of joy. My baby, a real businesswoman. I always knew you had it in you, sweetheart. Unlike some people, she added, giving me a pointed look, Linda isn't content to just work for others. She's making her own way in the world. I bit my tongue so hard I could taste blood. $30,000 of MY money had made this own way possible, but heaven forbid anyone acknowledge that. When are you opening? I asked, running my hand along a rack of sweaters. They were nice, really nice. Designer labels, quality fabric. Not exactly what I'd expected from a business plan that originally involved cheap Chinese imports. Oh, soon, Linda said vaguely, quickly steering the conversation to her plans for the store window display. Over the next couple of weeks, I kept checking Linda's social media obsessively. There were plenty of posts, Linda at fancy restaurants, Linda at spa days, Linda showing off new shoes and bags, but nothing about the store. No coming soon announcements, no sneak peeks, no business updates. Not a single mention of her entrepreneurial venture. Then came another Sunday dinner at my parents' house. The moment I walked in, I knew something was up. Linda was sitting at the kitchen table, eyes red and puffy, while Mom hovered over her with a box of tissues. What's wrong? I asked, though a part of me already knew where this was heading. Oh, Anita. Linda burst into fresh tears. Everything's falling apart. The supplier increased their prices, And the store needs renovations before we can open, and there are all these permits I didn't know about. I need another $20,000 or the whole business will fail before it even starts." I actually laughed. I couldn't help it. "You're kidding, right? Another 20,000? Anita," Mom gasped. "How can you be so cruel? Your sister is in crisis." "Crisis? She hasn't even opened the store yet. How about showing me some business records? Receipts? Anything?" "I can't believe you don't trust your own sister," Dad joined in, his voice heavy with disappointment. "After everything we've done for you." I looked around the kitchen, at my crying sister, my tearful mother, my disapproving father. This was a scene I'd witnessed 1,000 times growing up, and I knew exactly how it would end. With shaking hands, I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. Another $20,000. Gone in seconds. More than half my savings now transferred to Linda's account. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." Linda's tears miraculously dried up as she hugged me. "You're the best sister ever. I promise you won't regret this." 2 weeks after I handed over the second installment of money, I was mindlessly scrolling through Instagram during my lunch break when I saw it. My hand froze mid-bite of my sandwich. There was Linda, posing in what looked like a doctor's office, her face showing obvious signs of recent plastic surgery. The caption beneath the photo read, "The best investment is an investment in your appearance. New me, transformation, self-love." My sandwich hit the desk. $50,000. $50,000 of my money, and there was my sister, fresh from what looked like a nose job and God knows what else, bragging about investments on social media. I scrolled frantically through her other recent posts. Designer shopping bags in Dubai. Sunset yoga in Bali. Cocktails in Singapore. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. I needed proof, real, solid proof that she had scammed me. Without it, I knew exactly how this would play out. Linda would cry, my parents would defend her, and I'd be painted as the jealous, unsupportive sister again. It took me 3 hours of research to find David Chen, a private investigator who specialized in financial fraud cases. His fee wasn't cheap, but I was way past caring about money at this point. "I need to know exactly what my sister did with $50,000 she claimed was for starting a business," I told him during our first meeting. "Every transaction, every trip, every purchase. Everything." Those were the longest 3 weeks of my life. I could barely sleep, barely eat. Every time my phone buzzed with a new social media notification from Linda, my stomach churned. Finally, David called me to his office. He had a thick folder waiting on his desk. "Your sister never intended to start a business," he said without preamble, opening the folder. "I've traced every dollar you transferred to her account. Would you like to see where your money went?" I nodded, and he began laying out documents one by one. Bank statements, credit card receipts, travel itineraries, medical bills. 20,000 went to cosmetic procedures, primarily nose reshaping and lip augmentation. Another 15,000 was spent on international travel. I'd documented trips to 7 countries in the past 2 months. The remaining money went to shopping sprees, luxury hotels, and restaurant bills. I felt sick. And the store? The one she showed us? David pulled out a rental agreement. Rented for 1 day only, specifically the day she showed it to you. The clothing was also rented, by the way. Everything was returned the next day. He pushed the folder toward me. "I've compiled everything into a comprehensive report. Bank records, rental agreements, medical bills, travel documentation, it's all here. Your sister perpetrated a deliberate fraud." I sat there for a long time, staring at the stack of evidence. $50,000. My dream of owning my own home. All gone so Linda could get a new nose and take selfies around the world. I could hear laughter from inside my parents' house as I walked up the driveway. Of course, it was Thursday afternoon, which meant the usual family tea gathering. Perfect. Let them all be here for this. The folder felt heavy in my hands as I pushed open the front door without knocking. They were all there in the living room, Aunt Martha with her usual gossip, Uncle Bob in his favorite armchair, my cousins scattered around with their phones, Mom serving tea, Dad reading his newspaper, and Linda, the center of attention as always, showing everyone something on her phone. "Linda," I said, my voice cutting through the chatter. "When are you planning to pay back my $50,000? The room went quiet. Linda looked up, flashing that sweet smile that had gotten her out of trouble so many times before. "Oh, Anita, you know I can't right now. All the money is tied up in the business. Taking it out would ruin everything I built. You understand, right?" "Built?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You mean like that nose job you built? Or those trips to Europe, Dubai, and Bali you built?" Linda's smile faltered. Mom stepped forward, frowning. "Anita, what are you talking about?" I opened the folder and started laying out documents on the coffee table. "There is no business. Here's the receipt for your plastic surgery. Here are your travel bookings. Oh, and here's my personal favorite, the one-day rental agreement for that fake store you showed us." Aunt Martha gasped. Uncle Bob leaned forward in his chair. My cousins finally looked up from their phones. "Anita," Dad said slowly, "I'm sure there's been some misunderstanding. Linda's just taking her time to set things up properly. She spent my money on vacations and a new face." I was shouting now. "Look at the evidence. I hired a private investigator. It's all here." "You spied on your own sister?" Aunt Martha clutched her chest. "How could you do something so underhanded?" "Underhanded?" I spun to face her. "She stole $50,000 from me, and I'm the one who's underhanded?" "Fine. If none of you want to see the truth, I'll let a judge see it. I'm suing her for fraud." The room erupted. Linda started screaming that I couldn't do this to her. Uncle Bob was yelling about family loyalty. My cousins were all talking at once. Dad was demanding I sit down and be reasonable. "You can't sue," Mom said suddenly, her voice cutting through the chaos. She smiled, and I recognized that smile. It was the same one Linda used when she thought she had the upper hand. "You have no proof Linda borrowed that money. What are you going to tell the judge? That you gave your sister $50,000 as a gift and now you want it back? Your father and I certainly won't testify that it was a loan." For the first time since I walked in, I smiled. I pulled out my phone, opened my messaging app, and held it up. "You mean like these messages where Linda specifically asks to borrow money for her business? Where she promises, in writing, to pay me back within 6 months? Those kinds of messages?" Without another word, I gathered up my evidence and walked out, leaving the door open behind me. I could hear them all starting to shout again as I walked to my car, but I didn't look back. I'd expected the trial to be long and messy, but the evidence was too solid to dispute. But it was Mr. Rodriguez, the store owner, who delivered the final blow. "Yes, she rented the space for one day," he testified. "She said it was for a prank video she was making for her family. She brought in racks of clothes in the morning and took everything out that same night. I thought it was strange, but she paid well for the day." I watched Linda's face as he spoke. For once, she wasn't crying or playing the victim. She just sat there, staring at her perfectly manicured nails, as though this was all beneath her somehow. Mom and Dad tried their best to defend her. Mom took the stand and spun a tale about Linda's entrepreneurial spirit and how she just needed more time to get the business going. Dad talked about how I was just jealous of my sister's creative business approach. But they couldn't explain away the evidence. The messages where Linda promised to repay the loan. The bank statements showing how she'd spent the money. The rental agreement for the fake store. The travel receipts, the medical bills. When the judge delivered her verdict, her voice was firm and clear. "The evidence shows clear intent to defraud," she said. "The defendant, Linda Mitchell, is ordered to repay the full amount of $50,000, plus an additional $20,000 in punitive damages for emotional distress and the costs incurred in investigating this fraud." Linda finally burst into tears then, but for once, they didn't work. I later heard through a former cousin, amazing how quickly former becomes necessary with family, that my parents had to take out a loan to help Linda pay me back. The money arrived in my account exactly as ordered. The next day, I signed the papers for my new apartment. It wasn't the one I'd originally been saving for. That dream had to be scaled back after spending money on lawyers and investigators, but it was mine. Every square foot of it was mine. My parents still call sometimes, leaving voicemails about how I've destroyed the family and broken your sister's heart. Aunt Martha apparently tells anyone who'll listen about how I turned on my own blood. Uncle Bob has written me out of his will. My cousins have blocked me on social media. They all see me as the villain in this story. The cruel, heartless sister who took poor Linda to court. The ungrateful daughter who embarrassed her family in public. The bitter woman who couldn't handle her sister's success. But you know what? Standing in my new apartment, watching the sunset through windows I own, I couldn't care less what they think.